Hello there. Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. I do hope you're doing very, very well. I'm doing fabulous, thank you very much. And don't forget to get yourself that perfect drink because you deserve it. Something lovely and ice cold and refreshing, or something warm and comforting, depending on what the climate is like where you are, or what you enjoy drinking. And if it's something unusual, let me know about it because I'm fascinated. But before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up. And let's get started with tonight's story. Dear Sarah and all your lovely listeners, there are things that happen in our world that are so prodigious, so extraordinary, so profound that they can be impossible to fathom. Things that I believe the powers that be have kept hidden, suppressed, concealed from us for a very long time. Secrets that lie in plain sight, that they want us to never comprehend, to witness or even understand. They are desirous for us to remain ignorant, naive, clueless, and obliviously unaware of just how powerful we are. For indeed, if we understood this intrinsic, profound truth, they would lose their ability to control us. Why do I know this? Because I have put the pieces together over many years of experiences and come to the startling revelation that there is so much we have yet to understand about our universe. Furthermore, there are boundless areas of untouched wilderness, and what roams in those parts of the world that are unfrequented by humans, one can only begin to imagine. The year was 1966, a powerful year in the Chinese astrological calendar, the year of the fire horse. I was 15 years old at the time. I grew up in Missouri, the place long revered for its beer brewing and delectable Lewis barbecue. The quintessential illustrious land of vast open prairies, fabulously productive farmers' fields filled with soybeans, corn and pawpaws, or meadows filled with grazing cows and horses. The rich fertile soils, silvery streams and abundant rivers make Missouri plentiful, productive and exceedingly abundant. But what many people fail to realize is that there are vast areas of natural dense woodland here in Missouri. That was certainly the case for me growing up on our family corn farm. Our farmhouse was lavishly fringed by large sculptural oak trees. It was so picturesque, beguiling, a symmetrical two-story building, painted in a faint buttercream, with pale blue shutters and windows, along with an ornate blue front door. If you made it into a tiny replicate, it would have been the perfect doll's house that every little girl would aspire to own, for it was so pretty. Indeed, anyone who visited our home would describe it as such a magical house. It was easy on the eye, blending so seamlessly into the countryside, almost as if it had always belonged there. My mother, who was passionate about yard work, transformed our verdant rich lawn into a showstopper of note. The front yard boasted a French-style open courtyard with white trellising highlighted with showy borders of colourful flowers in spring to summer, from snapdragons, petunias, lobelia, dianthus, geraniums, and the list goes on, but you get the general gist. On the right-hand side of our property were acres and acres of cornfields, while the rear of our property sprawled out into a lavish woodland consisting primarily of different species of oak, hickory and flowering dogwood that produce an abundance of berries the birds love to eat. I'm not a person that has a kind of memory that recalls the insignificant events in my life with much detail or clarity, but certainly what happened to me and my sister Julia in the spring of 1966 I have never been able to forget. This is the first time I've actually shared this experience in a public forum, in an anonymous way. It was a day like any other, a regular day, although the freezing cold days of winter were behind us, which was the reason why this day was more special than most, as enjoying the first radiant beams of the spring sunshine was something we truly appreciated. Like the raccoons, squirrels or bears in the wilderness, we too felt as if we'd emerged from a long hibernation, spent by crackling hot fires, buried indoors with books to read, television to watch and homework to complete. As kids, we loved nothing better than exploring the exquisite woodland oasis that flanked the rear side of our property, stretching back for many miles in a sea of verdant green scrubland. It was especially lovely because there was a natural undulating stream that traversed through the valley, caressing the sculptural rocks with a gushing feisty current, along with foaming white water. It was so crystal clear you could see the rocks lying beneath the water. My sister Julia was 12 years old at the time. Yet despite the 3-year age difference between us, we were remarkably close and loved spending time together as siblings. On this exquisitely beautiful sunny spring morning, we were both attired in shorts and t-shirts. We entered this blissful, tranquil wooded sanctuary, always bedazzled and surprised by how spectacular and ravishingly beautiful it was. The tall, majestic oak trees towered above us, their rubenesque, curvaceous branches spreading out so gracefully, like dancing ladies. Their upper buxom heads of glistening new leaves created the most fabulous parasol effect above our heads, while pretty light prisms trickled through the leaves and branches, dappling the forest floor beneath us with such an enchanting, magical light, delicate, subtle, ethereal, and mystical. The terrain itself was comprised of a rich, fertile soil, with the previous leaves from last fall now turned to mulch. It was pleasurable pressing our feet against the cushioning of the soft floor, with its pretty scattering of bluebells, yellow daffodils, and electric green lacy ferns that grew abundantly in this space. As my sister and I walked through these arresting, awe-inspiring woods, something changed. It wasn't just the birds' song fading and dissipating, almost as if it had melted away like the butter on a hot cross bun, but something was exceedingly different about this capricious, ambiguous forest. I so wish I could put a finger on what it was that had altered, but it was as if the whole forest had morphed into something else, or some other place. The place seemed no longer familiar. It felt like it had shifted and changed, and that was when we saw a girl in a red hooded anorak running through the woods, so very fast. There was something strange and outer-worldly about her, almost as if she didn't belong in this place. But then, who was she? We tried to run after her. We knew that no one should be ferreting around on our private land like this, but that wasn't the real reason we chased after her. We were curious about who she was. She would have stood out on a street corner with other kids, as there was something anomalous and rather incongruous about her. "Excuse me! Excuse me!" we called after her. The girl stopped for a moment. She turned around to look directly at us. The headspace of her anorak, where you would expect to see her head, was an empty hollow, filled with an intense blackness. Yet despite that, we knew she could see us, for we felt her eyes on us. She then turned around and was gone. Me and my sister stopped dead in our tracks, astounded by what we had seen, far too nonplussed and curious to be even remotely afraid. "Did you see that?" said Julia. "The girl had no face, but she had the energy of a girl. What's going on? There's no way that she was a ghost." We decided to see if the mysterious red-hooded girl had left a trail of footprints behind her, and indeed she had. We could see the tiny footprints of her shoes embedded in the trail. It was very curious. Who was she, we wondered? What was she doing in our woods? Why did she have no face? We continued to look for the young girl, when all of a sudden we heard the sound of what I can only describe as heavy gates being thrust open, very slowly, deliberately. When I say heavy, I mean substantial gates. It sounded as if they hadn't been oiled in years, as they squeaked, creaked, and groaned. "What was that?" said my sister. I shrugged, for I couldn't come up with any answers. Things in the forest this morning had become seriously eldritch. All of a sudden, the misty dark forest grew gloomy, dim and grey, as if the light of the day had been permanently expunged from it. It grew darker with every second, as if the sun had set outside the forest. The temperature dropped significantly. It became considerably cooler, while fresh autumn leaves that should not have been on the ground in spring took flight, were dancing and blowing across the ground like crisp golden butterflies in a cool breeze. And that was when we discerned what I can only describe as a wide-open doorway on one side of the forest that was framed by a gleaming bright light that twinkled like a silvery star. The autumn leaves and the cool air were shooting through this open space where the air emanated from, rather like an air conditioning system. It appeared to be some kind of portal, wormhole, or escape hatch, if you like, into another dimension, realm, or alternative reality. Who knows? It was so intriguing, inspiring, beguiling. We both were eager to walk through it, but we vacillated with feelings of hesitancy and reluctance. We got the overwhelming sense that should we walk through this doorway, we might never be able to return to our reality. I remembered the story of the lion and the witch in the wardrobe. I felt excited. Could this be a portal to another world, like there was in the wardrobe? Then I felt silly. For Narnia was a mysterious world in a story. It was an author's imagination, was it not? Now I was not so sure, because this doorway was very definitely real. You could see the glittering light coming through it. All of a sudden we heard the forest floor pound with an aura of imminent urgency. Boom! 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 It sounded like something massively huge was thundering towards us with a dogged determination, almost as if time was of crucial essence, like an ambulance in a race to get to the scene of an accident. Whatever it was colossally big, as the ground heaved, groaned under its considerable weight. And that was when, standing before us, was the hugest, most monstrous creature I've ever seen, that now I know to be a Bigfoot. The creature was behaving peculiarly strangely. It appeared to be grunting and snorting. Its deep-set dark eyes looked very aggrieved, distressed, worried even, as if he was greatly troubled by something, and whatever it was that concerned him was about us. Looking back, I believe he was trying to tell us not to go anywhere near this portal, for I'm in absolutely no doubt that this creature knew what this portal was, and what it invariably meant. The creature stood in front of the doorway, as if barricading and blocking the way, to prevent us from entering it, rather like a striker being disabled from shooting the all-important goal. The Bigfoot need not have worried, because we wanted to hightail it out of there as fast as we possibly could. We sensed something was intrinsically wrong with that open portal. The trouble was, try as we might to run away, we couldn't. I realised that the wind from the doorway had become like a magnetic, prepossessing force that was extricating us forwards into the murky depths, picking up a heavy wind speed and strength like nothing I've ever encountered before. Imagine an opening with a tornado in its depths. That was what this portal had become. We had become like fragile leaves being energetically blown into its depths. This creature tried to become a windbreak for us, but even he was no match for this doorway, which was like a cyclone of spinning air, whirling, wheeling, twisting and rotating around and around like a cooler fan on your ceiling, but at a crazy speed. In a trice my body was lifted up weightlessly, as if the wind itself had become a powerful hand that had yanked me forcefully through the doorway, sucking me into its depths. I have never felt such terror as I felt in those moments, for I was helpless against this blustering assault on my body, as the current whacked, thrashed, and punnelled me like a flimsy open umbrella in the wind. My heart was thundering in my ears. I could feel every single thump vibrate through my chest. My hands and legs oscillated like an angry octopus, desperately trying to swim away from the current of air that I began to fight. It was like being caught up by the invisible man. The Bigfoot grabbed me with his large hands like a football. He pushed me away from the force of the doorway. But as he did this, my sister Julia was sucked into its depths. Then she was gone and vanished from my sight. The powerful, whirling, forceful suction started all over again, rather like an industrial hoover being switched on at the mains. But the Bigfoot caught my seemingly imponderous body just in the nick of time. He rescued me from being swallowed and gulped down a dark vortex, which was like the empty hollow of a whale's colossal jaw. Then I heard the ominous squeaking sound of doors being closed again. Then the open doorway was finally gone. It dematerialized, but where was Julia? I felt waves of terror trickle down my spine, like spasms of shocking electricity. What was I going to do? Julia had completely vanished. Maybe she would never come back. I stood there gawking at the creature, feeling a rising despair hijack my spirit. A huge emptiness engulfed my being, and great trepidation. What would my parents say if they knew that Julia was never coming back? I knew it would destroy them. It seemed I was not wrong. The Bigfoot remained still by the place where the doorway had once been only moments before. He regarded me with his deep-set dark eyes, with an expression of sadness on his leathery grey face. Even his furrowed forehead was deeply crinkled, as if he empathised with my grievous distressing plight. I found these words riding on my thoughts like little dolphins surfing the waves of an undulating ocean. Don't worry. I'll try and get her back for you, came a deep, guttural voice in my head that was most certainly not my own. I was thinking that this had to be in my imagination speaking to me, but this incredulous creature assured me that this was not the case. He used his body language, pointing to his pyramid-shaped head, and then to my head. His dark golden eyes stared into mine. What you thought you heard was real. I am speaking to you. My name is Hania, which is Cherokee for spirit warrior. I stared at him for a moment, wondering what on earth he actually was. I knew that in The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, the characters that they had encountered were strange creatures, but this was no novel. It was real life. So what was this thing? The creature was 9 foot tall, with a human face, covered in long flowing hair. He was thick with muscle, lean and sinewy. He reminded me of pictures I'd seen of early man. Only his face reminded me rather of an indigenous Indian warrior, with an outer-worldly intelligence that I could not fathom. Of course, when my parents learnt about my sister's disappearance, they immediately believed that she had been abducted. I was taken to the police station to give my version of events. As you can imagine, my revelations about what had transpired went down like a lead balloon. I mean, who in their right mind would believe my outlandish story? I most certainly wouldn't. The police detective was a slender young man in his early 30s who looked as if he possibly did some lightweight boxing, as he was sinewy, with a full thick head of dark hair, a very square jawline, olive skin and hazel eyes. He sat down on the opposite side of the desk with a notepad in his hand to scribble down any relevant details. Son, I know this is hard for you, but we are very concerned as to the whereabouts of your sister Julia. Do you remember what transpired? Did you see a suspicious man loitering around your property at any stage? No, sir. I told you exactly what happened. There was a magnetic doorway in the forest. It was sucking us down its vortex. A large caveman tried to stop us from being pulled into the depths of its cyclone energy. Unfortunately, Julia got caught up in it, and she was whirled away. It looked like a wormhole or opening into another world. It was so seriously weird. You possibly think I'm completely mad as a hatter, and I understand where you're coming from, for if I was wearing your shoes, I would too. But I promise you, sir, I'm not making any of this stuff up. The young man raised a sceptical brow. I couldn't blame him, really. I knew I sounded ludicrous, but I wanted to tell him the truth. The trouble was, I was beginning to sound like I'd lost my marbles. Son, you know the story that you are accounting for is very unlikely to have happened in our reality. I believe you thought it happened, but I think you must have been drugged. Do you remember anyone giving you sweets or a strange drink of some kind? Try hard to remember. No, I promise you, my recollection of what happened is accurate. So you don't remember seeing anyone strange? Well, I did see a strange girl, I told the detective. She had no face. I felt almost sorry for the poor detective. He rubbed his chin reflectively. I could see the frustration building up in his eyes. He was struggling to be patient with me. Perhaps I shouldn't have mentioned the girl with no face. Now he must seriously think I was bonkers. You must realize, son, you are sounding nonsensical and irrational to me. You're either spinning me a fabulous yarn. You have an outstanding imagination, or you believe what you're telling me is the truth. I am inclined to believe the latter is the case. You have either been subject to some kind of hypnotic effect or hallucinogenic substance of some kind. No, detective, I haven't had anything of that kind, I protested. Please believe me. I'm not making any of this up. I know it sounds crazy. I'm the first to admit it. Look, son, is there anything you can tell me about anything prior to your sister going missing? Can you think of any stranger approaching you recently that was behaving suspiciously? Any trespassers seen on your land? No, sir, nothing of the kind. Before long, I shut up about what I'd seen, because no one believed a word of it. And the more I reflected over the event, the more dreamlike and obscure it became in my mind's eye. Even I was beginning to doubt what I'd seen myself. My mother believed I'd made the anomalous events up in my own mind to protect myself from the gravity of what really had transpired that day. I think something quite dreadful happened, and you forced that part of your brain not to remember and created a new alternative. I do remember after my sister went missing that those were indeed the darkest days of our entire lives. Things only got worse when the police informed us that a body of a young woman had been retrieved, floating upside down in a local pond, who they believed was my sister. My parents had to go and identify her. They were in pieces, so broken up, distraught. "What if it's our Julia?" my mother had cried, clutching her mouth with her hands. "What if it's our baby?" My father had taken her into his arms to reassure her. "We need closure, sweetheart," he'd said. "If it's Julia, we'll have to bury her. Now you need to be brave. You need to have courage. I know it's hard, but we can do this together." "But she's only 12. I mean, she can't be dead, can she? I mean, who would hurt a 12-year-old girl?" "There are some very sick people out in the world," my father had said. My mother was so shattered it broke my heart to see her drive off to the police station with my dad. I was praying that it was not my sister's body that they would find. Fortunately, they returned home with brighter expressions on their faces, as the young body recovered was not my sister's, but they felt so sad for the parents who would soon discover that their daughter was dead. I do remember that tumultuous time when my sister went missing, so clearly, for every single day dragged by slowly. It continued to be a tortuous, grueling time for us all. The worst part of it all was the not knowing what had really happened to poor Julia. Every day dragged by slowly, rather like an elastic band that stretches and stretches with no end in sight. The days were hollow, like great big voids of empty despair and hopelessness. In my heart I held a desperate longing for the light to appear on the horizon, a glimmer of hope that Julia might just return home. Our days were devoid of joyful laughter. Background music was redundant. Delicious smells wafting from our kitchen were all but absent. Our house was filled with flowers from well-wishers. The church was praying for us, while kindly neighbours had brought us home-cooked meals. Our appetites had been stolen from us. We felt as if we were all holding our breaths under the water, only willing to breathe again when Julia walked through that door. We waited for the phone to ring, or for someone to call around to bring us the much-needed answers we were waiting for. We wanted to see the police car driving down our driveway, but we didn't as well. Our emotions were conflicted, raw, inflamed, exposed. It was a mixed bag of feelings. Even my enigmatic, baffling experience in the woodgrove became cloaked with a thick blanket of haziness, shadowed by my own uncertainty. Was my mother right? Had I made this whole thing up, I wondered? Maybe the detective was right, and I had been subject to some kind of mind control, where an evil predator with duplicitous motives had abducted my sister and made me believe some outlandish, crazy story that did not have any correlation with the natural world or reality itself. Then a miracle happened that shook our lives to the core, with feelings of rapturous joy and celebration. For on the 8th day after my sister was reported missing, at about 11 o'clock, she just waltzed into the kitchen, as if nothing had even transpired. I remember she was angry with me, indignant even. "Why did you bog off like that? That wasn't funny," she said, looking at me with an annoyed expression on her face. "Why did you leave me in the woods alone?" I just took her into my arms, hugging her with tears spilling down my cheeks, while I called out, "Mum! Dad! Julia!" My parents were so sensitized to the sound of my sister's name that they both eagerly bolted down the staircase, stopping midway on the stairs as they glanced down at Julia, their eyes wide as saucers, their mouths hanging open like Venus flytraps. It was like for a moment the sight of their own daughter was almost impossible to comprehend, for they had resigned themselves to the fact that they would never ever see her again. "Julia, is that really you?" said my mother, dashing down the steps and hurrying towards her, cradling her in her arms, holding her so tight that the poor girl could barely breathe. "I can't believe it's you! Oh my God! I thought you were dead!" Julia was bewildered. "What's wrong with you all? Why are you acting so super weird? You're really creeping me out." "You've been missing for 8 days, sweetheart.
We thought you were dead. Where have you been? Who abducted you? How did you escape?"
"Abducted me? Nobody abducted me. What are you talking about?" Julia began to recount the strange story I had told the police about the girl in the red anorak with no face, about the strange doorway in the woods, the absurd creature trying to block our path. She remembered what I'd recalled to the very last detail, but there was a pronounced twist to her story. She did remember being blown into the wormhole by this powerful magnetic surge. After that, she remembers nothing. The only other thing she remembers is moments before she left that wormhole to re-enter our reality. She encountered the girl in the red anorak with no face, but this time the girl had a face. She was pretty with curly blonde hair and bright blue eyes. She told Julia that her name was Melinda Penningway. She needed to help her get back to her time. "What are you talking about?" Julia had asked her. The girl put her fingers on her lips. "Shh," she said. "It's a big secret. No one can know about it." The next thing she remembers is a huge hand pulled her out of the doorway against this forceful magnetic current that was blowing. Then she was in the hands of the caveman who had told me in my mind that he would get my sister back safely home. Although it took him 8 days, it seems he was true to his word. My mother was completely stunned. "I don't understand. Your story's almost identical to your brother's. But what happened in that missing time? Those missing 8 days?" Over the years, my sister has had fleeting memories of another place that she believed she visited during that time. But she didn't know where the place was, and why she felt she'd been there before. She did remember it was a beautiful place, with aquamarine water, but she failed to remember anything else. Another strange thing was the clothes my sister was wearing that day. They were very old and worn, but when she returned that day, her old shorts and top were as new as the day that they were when they were first purchased. This was something my mother couldn't get her head around. When she saw that, she said it was physical proof and confirmation that something super weird happened to us. Also, my sister's puberty was delayed for 5 years after that experience. When the detective spoke to me and Julia, once he heard how our stories correlated, he said, "I think you may have entered a parallel universe or a wormhole. I believe there is more to this world than meets the eye. I have seen weird things on the force that have led me to this conclusion, but you never heard that from me. If you want any sound advice, I would suggest you keep your mouth shut about your peculiar experience, for you are in danger of being laughed at by people who think you're crackers. But for the record, I think you really did enter an alternative reality. But your secret is safe with me." You would have thought that my sister and I would have been put off going into the woods again, but we were not. On the contrary, our absurd experience made us more eager to find answers to our so many questions. I do remember one day we encountered that Bigfoot again. I was thrilled to see him, because I realised he'd tried to protect us from entering that portal, and for that I'm ever grateful. He approached us both and gave us each a river stone of some kind. In my mind, he said, "Keep it. It'll bring good fortune. May the Most High God be with you." And then he was gone, like that. So there you are. That's my story. Wow, what a fabulous story. Until next time, goodbye and good night.